The following podcast is an Embassy Row production.
Hi everybody, this is a new episode of the Shaken and Stirred Show. I am Nigel Barker in New York, and it's really, really good to be with you. You know, I was just thinking I need to up my production in my studio. I'm in my office. This is where I've been doing Shaken and Stirred for the past, I guess, over a year. This whole past year that we've just had, that's all been at home in my studio. I used to love to do the podcast on the road, and I think that's where we're going to have to take it going forward, is on the road, people, in bars, in hotels, in cool places. If you know of a great cool place that I should go and have a drink and a chat, then please let me know. DM me at the Shaken and Stirred Show on Instagram, and tell me of your favorite haunt, your top bar, the best pub near you, a club I should go to, or a great mixologist or bartender you think I should visit. And perhaps you can pop by too and we can have a drink while we're at it. What do you think of that? Well, talking about drinks and all the rest of it, this is the Shaken and Stirred Show, and it would not be the Shaken and Stirred Show if I didn't have a rather fabulous cocktail. And I have decided to opt for what some people think is one of the, it's a cocktail where, let's say, has one of the worst names out there, but at the same time is really a classic. It's the Cosmo. Oh yes, I went for a pink Cosmo, although mine is, I'm going to taste it right now. A little bit more tart than the average Cosmo because I like extra cranberry, which makes it not as pink as it could be. Of course, the Cosmo or the Cosmopolitan is that very pink drink you see in a martini glass. Bartenders, for some reason, always turn their nose up at it if you order one. I used to be embarrassed to order one. I used to not order them, but my wife, my girlfriend at the time, would order one, and I would try it because it was so delicious, and then pretend to sort of sneakily have hers, and then say, "Oh no, it's not for me. It's a pink drink. I don't." You know what? That looks too frilly, but it's really a classic sour. Is the fact of the matter, and you know it's got a sort of a bit of a history, and ultimately it was Sex and the City and Carrie Bradshaw, Sarah Jessica Parker, who made the drink really famous in Sex and the City. It really almost became another character in the show. I'm not sure how many they drank, but that is also why it became arguably the most famous cocktail in America, maybe ever. Now, it was created by a guy called Cecchini or Caccini in the famed Tribeca bar called the Odeon, which, if you've ever driven through Tribeca, you'll see it with the neon lights sort of flickering on the outside. It was a classic bar. People like Madonna used to go there. And in fact, Madonna used to order these regularly, apparently, with her friend Sandra Bernhardt, who used to share a studio with me at Sirius XM when I used to do the Gentleman's Code over there with Andy Cohen. And you know, she was a regular, ordering it from Caccini himself at the bar. His name is Toby Caccini. And, you know, just give me another one, boyfriend, is what apparently she used to say. Give me another one. Now, it is made with absolute citron, which is, if you want to be true to the drink, it's you kind of have to have absolute citron. That's how it is in the film. Of course, any vodka citron will kind of do. It is made with Cointreau and lime juice. And it's what has it also got in there? And of course, cranberry juice. Now, I believe Caccini used to use ocean spray. So real, just classic down the line, and it's all shaken and then just poured into your glass. And you know, so and I guess the amounts, it's about sort of 1.5 ounces of the vodka to a 1/2 ounce of Cointreau, a 1/2 ounce of lime juice, and a sort of splash, depending on how tart or how red you want your drink, of the cranberry. And you know, the funny thing is, when it was first introduced to the bar, the actual story goes that a bartender who was also working with Caccini had told him about this Cosmopolitan, the full name, but it was made with like a sour mash and a triple sec. And he thought, ooh, that doesn't sound too good. I'm going to mix that up. I'm going to put in, and you know, and if anyone knows about making margaritas, you know, if you want to get rid of the sour mash, you swap it for a Cointreau or Grand Marnier and fresh lime juice. That's your sour mash, right? And he just did that to the Cosmopolitan, and voila, the Cosmo was born. So there, a little bit of history about my drink. I thought I'd go into it because it is a much maligned cocktail, and it shouldn't be. Now, we have an incredible guest today, a kind of a guest that we've never really had on the show before, who usually sits in the interviewing chair, not as the person being interviewed, but the interviewer. So this will be interesting as the tables get turned. But before we get to her, we'll have some booze news for you. A little bit of extra booze news. And we've got a couple of other interesting things. I've got some archaeological discovery, and you know I love a great archaeological discovery in the booze, dating booze back 2,700 years. We also have something right up to date, which is Guinness, one of my favorite stouts in the world, favorite beers in the world, if you like. I've come out with a chocolate mint stout, which we're going to get to that too. But first of all, archaeologists discover 2,700-year-old wine press in Mesopotamia, which is the sort of, I like to say, the grand way of saying Iraq. But you know, they have found this extraordinary discovery. UNESCO are trying to list it on the World Heritage Site. And let me read this to you from the professor at the University of Udine. He said, "This is quite a unique archaeological finding that is the first time in northern Mesopotamia that archaeologists are able to identify a wine production area." Now, you know, there's a lot of stories about where wine came from, who first created it, and 2,700 years sounds like a long time, but in the grand scheme of wine, it's not. There are, you know, we've talked about it on Booze News before. We found wine 6,000 years ago, I think even 8,000 years ago in China, a rice wine. But this is the very first time in this part of the world. Now, in the ruins, they found 14 industrial sort of installations carved into the rock. And they were square and circle basins where apparently the workers would press the grapes and extract their juice during the winemaking, and that sort of grape juice, which is called a must, is then transferred into clay jars. And I believe they found pieces of these clay jars around there as well. So super fascinating. Love these sorts of stories because it really gives some history to booze. You know, and we often don't realize just how long it's been a part of our culture. And then talking about culture, Guinness. You know, my mum apparently used to drink Guinness when she was breastfeeding me. Now, I can't recommend that anymore. Obviously, pregnant ladies out there, I mean, not allowed to have any alcohol, and when you're breastfeeding, not allowed to have any alcohol either, I believe. But my mum, back in the day, was told, because I was a very hungry baby, that I should be, you know, that she should rather drink Guinness, and not just any old Guinness, but like a 4-pack. A 4-pack, people, every single day. So clearly, that's not 100% great for you, I don't think. But the funny thing is, you know, I'm one of 6 kids, and I am the tallest by about 6 inches. And my mother has always put it down to the fact that when she breastfed me whilst drinking Guinness. So I basically had Guinness on tap. Now back to this story, because they have launched a Bourbon barrel-aged chocolate mint stout. How fantastic does that sound? This is from their Guinness Open Gate Brewery in Baltimore. And they're creating this Guinness in these Kentucky bourbon barrels, which I think is already fantastic. By the way, this stout clocks in at 10.8% ABV. That's a lot of alcohol in a beer. So it's not, you know, for the light of heart. Don't just sort of think, okay, this is some fun chocolate, you know, stout. It's going to be fine. It's pretty hardcore. It's going to be retailing in 4-packs of 11.2 ounce bottles, and they're selling for about $20 for a 4-pack. You know, it's really quite fantastic. And by the way, they're also coming out with an imperial gingerbread stout, which is apparently brewed with allspice, ginger, nutmeg, and cinnamon. So there you go, people. Something to celebrate, something to look forward to, and a little bit of booze news. Now, as I mentioned, my next guest is normally the interviewer, but today we're swapping chairs. Our guest this week has won 2 Emmys for her work as an interviewer, reporter, and weekend entertainment anchor on Good Morning America, was formerly an ABC national news correspondent, and is now the anchor of NewsNation's latest debut program, Morning in America. Adrienne Bankert. Adrienne, nice to meet you, driving the car with you, be your mirror, all these things. Wow.
It was like carpool karaoke, but really, really fast.
Super fast. I love it. Well, listen, cheers, by the way. Have you got yourself a drink to sort of drink along with me?
I wanted to, and you said, I was asked what my favorite drink is. Honestly, I have to be
What
in
is your favorite
bed.
drink?
I have to be in bed in an hour. So my favorite drink right now would be a ginger beer with a twist of lime.
Okay, well, if you weren't, by the way, it's all extraordinarily inappropriate. We're now talking about going into bed, and we haven't even started the damn podcast. Look, Adrienne, I wish we could rewind the tape, but we can't. We have to just go forward on this. I'm just going to battle on. But if you weren't going to bed in an hour,
No, more.
what would you be drinking? What is your go-to?
Wait a minute, I'm confused. You're telling me it's inappropriate for me to talk about going to bed when I'm a morning news host. So this is part of the general conversation. What time do you have to go to bed when you have to wake up so early? And you're asking me what I would drink at the bar when you're all nervous about us being in the car together. We're already jumping to the bar.
Well, I know. Well, it's a shaken and stirred show. It's very messy and sticky on this show.
I can tell. So we'll leave that to our imagination. But right now, I would love like a hot cup of tea and just relax. I stayed up till 8:30 last night. I got a phone call at 10:30. Didn't know what day it was. Had a full-on conversation like I was wide awake, and then had to go back to bed and wake up at 1. So yeah, tea would be fitting.
Do you ever have a cocktail? Do you ever indulge?
I can't say that I don't. I would just say that I'm like a Rolls Royce, where I've learned that I have to make sure that I'm careful with different chemicals in my body, be it a cocktail or caffeine. I just feel like when you do morning news or when you do anything where you're actually in the public eye on camera and you're supposed to be chipper and yourself and authentic, then you have to be really, really careful about what you put in your body. So I will be honest with you, it's often very much a calculated decision whether or not to have a cocktail.
And arguably, if you were to have one, what would it be? See, I'm going to get it out of you one way or the other. This is what it's going to be like. For God's sakes, it's like trying to pry blood out of a stone.
I'll have what you're having. That's usually what I would say. I'll have what you're having.
Well, I'm having a Cosmo, so I would imagine that you might love one of those.
Well, shake it and stir it. It makes total sense that this is a proper conversation with Nigel Barker. It's lovely.
And by the way, talking about that, you mentioned that you have to be, as if you're acting as if you have to be 100% sober to be on television. When the reality is, I can tell you that some of the best top model judgings we ever did, we'd had a glass of wine or a glass of champagne, and and that would happen because we'd be late into the evening sometimes, and we'd be like, you know what, a little cocktail, isn't it the worst thing?
How would that go though? I mean, did you ever feel like you were like, okay, I should have waited, or we should have waited till after we were wrapped, or maybe I had one too many? Did you ever think that?
No, never. No, I'm kidding. I mean, look, we never drank that much. We only had a glass of champagne or something, one glass, so it's, we would be shooting at some fancy hotel or some crazy location. And it was like, okay, someone would, you're in some beautiful place in the world, like, I don't know, Milan or Rome or Paris, and so at that point when the locals would drink wine at lunch, so they're serving it to you, and they're like, oh, would you like a glass? And so we'd say yes, and Kelly Catrone would be like, oh, let's have a glass of champagne or whatever. It was never anything sort of stronger than that, but hey, these things happen. But
yeah, well, they're very cheersy and very celebratory, and I think that that's lovely and warm. And when I think about going to Europe again, because I was just telling someone, gosh, it's been a long time since I've traveled. Oh, I would love to go to Europe or Asia right now, and trying to pick my dream destinations and what I'd be eating and what I'd be drinking, and just having a little bit of a fantasy, because right now I'm building a new show and we've only been on 2 months as of today.
So let's jump into that. Congratulations. Amazing.
Thank you.
New show. I mean, it's very exciting. And I think it's such a complicated time in media right now. I mean, there's, it's brave almost to become a journalist. I think that when I was a kid, it seemed like, and it probably still is to some extent, very exciting to be a journalist. You think that you're on the front lines potentially, that you're getting to interview politicians and change makers, and you're right in there, right when things are breaking, right? And you're telling the world, you're informing the world of what's happening. But obviously, in the past few years, that message has been distorted in many ways, and it seems that journalism is polarizing. It seems that it is divided. It seems that it's opinionated. It seems that there have been a lot of expressions and words being used against journalism that I believe are unfair a lot of the times. However, I do think, listening to what I read about your show, Morning in America, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to be sort of unbiased, right? You're trying to sort of deliver just the news, which is, by the way, when I grew up in the UK, listening to the BBC, they really just told you what was happening, not their opinion about why or how it happened. And so you kind of sat there and just thought, okay, that's happening, not that this news anchor is telling me what they think about it or whether it's bad or good. It was just, here it is, the 9 o'clock news. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So tell us, what's the sort of, I guess, your angle, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, I think you said it perfectly. I mean, there was a day in the UK, there's a day in America where you just tuned into the news and they sort of just told you the story and they moved on to the next thing. And there was a warmth and there was a familiarity with that anchor, that host, but it was more than just, oh, I think I like what they're wearing, or, oh, I think they seem like a nice or decent person. It was, what, this person genuinely wants to inform me or inspire me or provoke me to think differently, but they're not telling me what to think. And I believe that is our duty as all journalists, but I'm particularly intentional about it. I've been intentional about it my whole career, no matter who I've worked for. So I feel like all of the training that I've received to leave opinion on the back burner or not even in the equation at all is an important part of journalism today, is an important part of storytelling today. And to focus on stories that actually bring us together. I was looking at an article, because obviously we're inundated with emails. And this article has statistics on Thanksgiving and people who are trapped, whether they are vaccinated or not, they're seeing their family members at a higher level, Republican or Democrat, they are going and visiting with family, some of whom are vaccinated and some of whom are not vaccinated. And so it's just like, I was like, wow, almost the same percentage of people who are Democrat, Republican, vaccinated, and unvaccinated are actually traveling this year to see family and friends for the holiday. That's something we can all rally around, rather than talk about who hates what, who hates a mandate, who hates the vaccine, who hates that, this politician said this, or this politician or this party said this. And I think that we need to focus on the things that actually bring us together. And that's what I hope to do with Morning in America.
I mean, certainly good luck with that. I mean, but that being said, do you find that is there an actual wave of journalism now that where people are taking positions, or do you think that it is because, I mean, obviously, if you look at sort of the CNNs of this world, Fox News of this world, there are definitely opinions. I mean, this is opinionated news, regardless of whether you like the guy's opinion or not. You sort of, I like a lot of my friends, and I can show you my phone. I literally have CNN, Fox News, BBC, and New York Times as my 4 apps, and I will check all 4. And I will try and check all 4 for every article I can find.
Why?
And now, of course, I'm going to have to use yours as well and stick
yours
up there.
Put my app, NewsNation now.
NewsNation now will be up there, I promise, after that. But you're asking me why?
Why do you have all those different flavors of news?
Because I can't trust anybody. I don't know who's telling me anything. I love CNN, and I have for years, and I'm a registered Democrat, people, but it's not a situation where I want to be told someone's opinion necessarily, right? So I'll read one piece, and then I'll go to Fox News almost immediately from CNN, and then read what they've said. And then I will go to sort of BBC, which tends to be a little bit more agnostic, although these days not even as much as they used to be when I was a kid. And then I'll go to sort of New York, the New York Times, where it sort of perhaps is more adult version. Sort of they give it to me as sort of a grander, bigger words. The vocabulary is greater, and I sort of get a sense of like. Perhaps I can got a 30,000 foot look at it. But it's very important, because you can totally get a distorted side of a story if you only listen to one side, and that's a real shame.
It is.
Right? That's really damaging. So I guess the question I was asking is sort of, for you, how do you maintain that? Because as you're fed the news, where are you getting your stories from, and how do you know that they are untainted, if you like?
Well, I think number one, I will tell you this, and this is something that I talked about when I first joined the network. it is not my position to point out who's doing journalism wrong. It is not my job to critique or to judge other journalists or other networks, because I've worked for a number of different companies.
Sure.
And I've had great experiences at all of them. I believe that you have an individual dignity and privilege and responsibility as a journalist, and you can't get caught up in the machinery or the mechanics of it. You have to have this integrity and character of your own. And it's my job to report on what people are saying. I think that a big part of news and the opinion piece is that we're only sharing one portion of the population's opinion oftentimes. It's not just that that news host or that correspondent is sharing an opinion. It's really more that we're only portraying a portion of the perspectives in this country. And so it's my duty to say, listen, this is what these folks are saying. This is what these folks are saying. And wait, there's more than two perspectives. These folks over here say this. And to just be heard is so vital in our current culture, in our current media world. It's important to see that there are people who differ from you, and there is so much diversity of thought. But all too often, like you use all those different sources and different apps, you're getting a different perspective. What if you could tune in to one network and you could get all of those perspectives in one place? Then it's not about my opinion. It's about me sharing with you. Guess what? Your neighbor over here thinks this. And did you know your neighbor across the coast, the other coast, thinks this? Guess what? People in the middle of the country, your neighbors, fellow Americans, think this. And that's what I will continue to do. That is what I want to put everyday people's voices, which all of us in one sense are everyday people. But there are a lot of everyday people who have not been heard, who have not been seen, and are all of them with the world.
You know, one of the, I think something that everyone's asking is, or perhaps it's just evolved and people are no longer asking, they just expect it. But everything, it doesn't matter what happens, it's looked at through a political lens. And I think that is something which is probably the most damaging. It's as if, you know, something can happen like, you know, a tragedy where someone drives through a parade and kills a bunch of people. And that in itself is sort of a madman or an accident. And instead of just being reported for what it is, there is slants of where, you know, politically where these people are, what the march was about, who's walking here. It's not about people. I think it becomes very political. But there seems to be almost everything. It's almost like we can't talk about coffee without this sort of discussing, you know, whether people are on the left and the right and how it might affect them. Why is that? Why is it become that way? And is it possible, do you think, for us to start to move that conversation away from always having a political slant to it?
I feel that there are more people who believe like you do, that are saying, why is everything so political? I believe that you are not the minority. I believe you're the majority voice. It's just unfortunate that we have to create a fight, or we have to see a fight. You know, that where it leads is very much a played out methodology in telling stories. And I believe that people are craving a kinder, friendlier way to deliver, to distill the messaging that's out there, to tell people what's going on in their world. I think, frankly, after the past year and a half, people are fed up with simply hearing negative, destructive, polarizing, fearful storylines. I believe they want stories of inspiration. They want to see people working together. They see it happening. This is how I know that this is real. People see the neighbors helping each other. They see the kind acts of strangers. They see children of different ethnic groups and different backgrounds and different religions playing together on the playground. And yet then you turn on the television and it's as if there's another alternate universe. And I really do believe that people are saying, you know what, enough is enough. I know the reality that I'm living in. How come it seems like that's left out of the picture? And so I think people are craving, and they're going to start demanding a way of delivering news that perhaps hasn't quite been as much in focus as before, but we will not, in media, we will not be able to ignore it. I think this is the beginning of a great wave where people are going to look for more positive stories on news. And actually, if you turn on the television sets, I think a lot of news agencies are looking to tell those stories of inspiration, but oftentimes they're features, you know, they're at the bottom of the newscast. But higher up in the story count, will we start to see stories of those who are actually making the world a better place? Because that's what we all want. We want a better place for ourselves and for our families, for our children, for our schools. I mean, education being such a politicized conversation, but it will never go away. And I believe that people are craving hope, and not just because it's the holidays, and not just because we went through a pandemic, but because they really just want to see us be human to each other again. I really believe it.
I think it really also has to do with people just wanting to know what the news is, right? So what does the word news mean? Right. So, I think, when I think of news, it's something that you haven't heard of before. It's something that is coming to you that is new. Right. And you're going to listen to it and you're going to be, oh, that's a story I didn't know, or it's an update on a story that's going on. And but it seems to be that, to your point, that for all too long now, it's only news if it's bad news, right? So therefore, something amazing that's happened, or if it is amazing, it becomes sort of delegated to a special where it's almost like fun news at the end, and we're going to tell you a funny little story about something that happened that's nice, or it's CNN heroes and they make a special around it, but it's these people are heroes, which by default makes them into sort of fictional characters versus actual people, because it's, they're now heroes, which is like, okay, what are they? What does that mean? Whereas heroes are literally everyday people happening everywhere.
Ding, 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 ding. You're amazing. Right. I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly right.
Well, you mentioned it. I'm really echoing what you're saying, and you also mentioned something else, which is the fact that I know when I sit at my table with my friends at a party, my friends come from all sides of the political aisle. We don't really talk politics, in fact, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't seep in here and there. But it's civil and it's fun and it can be good banter, and we have a difference of opinion. But what binds us together is our humanity. Ultimately, people are good. They're not bad inherently, and they actually, they may have a difference of how they want government to control them or how they want their money to be spent and all those sorts of things, but they don't have to be the sort of thing that mean that we have to throttle each other and that we can't actually be nice or enjoy dancing in a room together, or all things that are human, right? The things that for thousands of years we've all done together. Now it's like we can't possibly, there's like a picket line between people, so I guess the question I have for you on that is, what role is media responsible for that? Because one can say politics, but a lot of this is coming from the media. It's coming from this rhetoric is coming through from the media. Obviously, we've had politicians like presidents even who are right up there who feel like they're journalists themselves by the way they go on. But do you feel that the actual news stations, the networks themselves, are responsible for pushing this kind of agenda to speak such to give such politics away?
That is a big question, and I wouldn't want to try to make sense of something so large, but I will say this: I believe that we do need to take responsibility individually for the messaging that we are putting out, that we should make sure to make ourselves accountable, because this is a grand stage. People are tuning in. They're using TikTok and Twitter, as well as the major networks and cable networks, to actually disseminate what is going on in their world, and to understand what people who look like them, or people who live near them, or people who live across the world from them are thinking and doing. And so I just know that for me personally, the reason why I chose to join a network like NewsNation is because they had this purpose-driven mission, which I hadn't seen in the same way at other networks. I had not seen a purpose-driven mission to say, you know what, there is a need, there is an audience there who wants exactly what you're talking about, Nigel. They want to see news, things that are new, not just the old stories or the same story rehashed and rehashed again and again with more damning evidence every single time they run it across the bottom banner of the screen. They want to hear something that maybe they hadn't heard before, and they want to see the world that they know, which is people like, again, you mentioned, at a cocktail party, having a conversation in a civil way without jumping into politics and jumping into controversies every 5 minutes, because that's just not real life. Target the acts of people who are doing things where they're 1 in a million. It's a 1 in a million opportunity to meet this person. It's a 1 in a million chance for this child to be cured of a certain disease. It's a 1 in a million chance at the lottery. When there are everyday people who are walking down the street, who are taking the train, who are driving in rush hour traffic right now, who are thinking, when is it going to happen for me? Or, I'm going to go and help my neighbor. I talked to this guy today. He's exactly who I want to have on the show every single day. He delivers groceries with the app Dumpling, and which is becoming more and more popular for grocery delivery. And he says, what's really in my heart is to encourage the grocery store workers when I go in, because they're under so much more stress due to staffing shortages. So whenever I go to the store, I think of one thing I can do every day to encourage the person working in the checkout counter or stocking the shelves. And I'm literally like melting, because I'm like, oh my gosh, you are who we all want to be. And he says, and if there's not a way that I can make them feel better that day, then I put my earbuds in and I listen to really happy music so I can have a smile on my face when I walk through. That's what we're all trying to do in the midst of politics, in the midst of inflation. I'm trying to think of the right word, inflation, in the midst of isolation. We are all saying, okay, can I connect? Can I leave this world a better place? Can I can I not be so busy that I don't realize what my kids are going through, that I don't realize what my parents are going through, that I don't realize what the person next to me who's waiting in line at the ATM machine or at the checkout counter going through. I really think that we're all craving real connection, and that's our responsibility. So I can't speak to really the problem. I'm really more solution focused right now. I know we both have seen the problem. I can't really explain the problem, but if I focus on the solution, you can only hit a target that you can see. And a lot of times in media, and specifically in news, we are pointing to the problem and we are pointing to the tragedy, but we're not pointing to the people who are the problem solvers. That's what we need to look at.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, do you get, stories on your desk that you decide that you just don't want to tell? I mean, or rather, if there is a really important story of the day, I mean, it seems like there is one because everyone's reporting on it. Yet, potentially, sometimes I listen to the news and I think, am I really this is really the story? This is really the news? But it's everyone's jumping all over it because it's outrageous or it's scandalous or it's it's something which is going to spike ratings temporarily, and then it's dropped the next day, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm wondering with someone like yourself, if you're trying to tell a certain type of news or tell it in a certain way, can you afford to not tell those stories? Otherwise you're sort of, are you missing something? As it feels that's what's happening. Everyone is, someone says something and another person reacts on the other side, another network, and then they point fingers at each other. They actually call each other out. Are the journalists calling journalists out? Who said this and who said that? And if I read Fox, they're talking about CNN reporters. I read CNN, they're talking about Fox report. And I'm like, guys, you're putting yourself into the news. You're making yourself the news. It's like, how are you the news? You're the news casters, the news readers. It's like, what the hell? I'm like, how are you the news? But they become the news. So I guess, to my point here, the question is are you able to pick and choose your stories? And if not, or if so, how?
I certainly can't tell you exactly how the sausage is made. I don't have that liberty fully, but I will tell you that there are conversations to be had. And whether it's a story like the border, some people would call what's happening at the border a crisis. Other people would say the situation, depending upon what network, what newscast you're watching and who you're listening to. The January 6th attacks, different people have different ways of defining what happened and the ramifications of what happened and the magnitude of what happened. I think that some stories can't be ignored, so to speak, or tabled, but I believe that you have to take the time to actually have the conversations before you get on air about, okay, so how are we going to tell the story in a way that is different than has already been told? You can only hear so many newscasts before, and I'm sure you've been here, where you're watching different channels or you're flipping through and it's like the same thing being regurgitated every single network with one particular angle off, or different than the other. But you're just like, it's like Pete and repeat. But I always, I never like to talk about kindness and empathy in a way that makes people think it's very sappy or that, oh, well, okay, Pollyanna, or if that's too dated for some of your listeners, someone who's just so tone deaf that they don't get that there are realities, that there are harsh realities, that there are hardships, that there are challenges in this world. And by God, we all know that there are, but when you talk about empathy and kindness, sometimes people could maybe make that assumption, right? But I truly believe that if we look through the filter of kindness and empathy, those are universal languages. They defy religion, they defy political party affiliation. And so rather than just regurgitate some lines in a script, asking the questions, I'm very honored that I have so many interviews. I mean, I don't count how many interviews I do a day, but at the height of the show, I mean, I can do easily 13 interviews in a day in 3 hours time because I'm live the whole time as the only host. And I'm really listening for what I can ask that other people would not be brave enough to ask. I'm looking to ask for the things that actually put a different perspective or it's not spin. It's how come nobody's asking? Yeah. How come nobody's asking this question? Right. So that's what I do.
Which again, I think the spin aspect is something different. That's when you're almost looking to catch someone out, right? It's an angle that you're trying to force them to sort of go down, versus asking a sort of a question that begs to be asked because of what they're saying, and you care about listening to what they have to say, not what you want to hear or the angle you want them to go down. And you mentioned something just a moment ago too, and I feel that personality is something which is curious with journalism, and something which I feel can get in the way of journalism, in as much as, not to say that our news anchors shouldn't be stars, shouldn't be celebrities, or shouldn't be, big personalities on some level, but or that they should be vanilla or very bland. But there is an element of, if you are going to deliver the news, if you are going to be sort of non-biased and unpolitical, so to speak, and agnostic potentially, then there is an element of being sort of like, here it is, and it's not about me. It's not about the drama of me. It's not about how I'm going to roll my eyes because I don't think sort of this. It's not because I'm going to shed a slight tear, or I'm going to look down disdainingly, or I'm going to, sort of show my anger, anguish. Not to say that you wouldn't be emotional, that you wouldn't be distressed or happy by a story, because all of this is human nature. But it's gone from something where someone can just deliver it and try and give it to you in a calm, kind way, almost like sort of a teacher might help a student because he wants them to learn, but one doesn't want to push him one way or the other. But it seems now that we're told the news, and it's a theatrical event. It's a sort of, like, wow, what's going to happen today? What are they going to do? It's a drama.
I think that personality is a wonderful thing. I mean, we want our children to have fully developed personalities and to be themselves. And I think that as long as you're yourself, then it's okay. It's not my job. I feel like I've forfeited the right to have an opinion, because I truly believe that journalism is a public service. And yet every once in a while, if we're doing something fun, then it's like we were doing a story about, and this is really light, this is not heavy, but maybe it's heavy to some people. There are more 18 to 29-year-olds living at home today than there were, I think, in the 1940s. And we were looking at this Bloomberg study or Business Insider, I can't remember. And so we're having this conversation, and one of the people on the set was saying, "Oh, you better get out of your house. You better get out of your mama's house." And I said, whether you live with your parents or not, there shouldn't be shame around it. I think there's too much shame. And I said, but you can pay rent. And and take your parents out to dinner too if you're living at home with them. But so you make things light, and you talk about things that we've all either been. I mean, I definitely moved back home after college, or someone who has. And there's a lot of responsibility on young people to try to arrive, to be famous, to be YouTube, and
or maybe there's just the Italian population has just become incredibly massive in America, because if you go to Europe, Southern Europe, people live in their homes with their parents until they're married, right? So it could be, if you're a New Yorker, that means when you're 40, you move out.
Right.
That's hey,
so we all can relate. Hashtag relatable,
Right.
So it's all good. But so those little things, like, I think that somebody thought, oh, well, if you're going to tell the news and you're going to be impartial, then you're going to be so clinical, or you're going to be too soft, or you're going to be too bland. And I believe that people confuse being impartial with being like dead or numb. You know, you can be alive. You can express your vigor without being so opinionated that you villainize. And I think that's the difference. Sharing an opinion without vilifying anyone is the key.
How about have a sense of humor? I mean,
that is the perfect way to say it.
I think that really, you know, there is serious sort of, I don't know, sense of humor failure. You know, with a lot of people, they no matter what it is, they can't laugh at themselves at all. They just, you know, it's sort of like everything has to be sort of super dramatic or it's super personal to them. It's like everything is not about you. You know, this is, and it's not all about what you have to say. And I think that little bit of, you know, you want to deliver the news, and I want to hear the news, but I don't mind if there's a slightly cheeky raised eyebrow, or there's a sort of an element of a kind of like, well, and there we have it for today's news, you know, like, or something where you're like, you can tell the guy thinks this is perhaps not great, or this is a little, you know, like, I'm not sure about this, whatever. There's a little element of that. That's human. But I think something to just on that point of obviously personality, if it becomes so dramatic that it's really that it's the show all about this individual and his opinions, and that's the only news we're getting, then that's dangerous. You know, it's no longer, which I understand as opinionated news. I mean, that's what people are watching these days, it seems, but that's the only place we're getting our news. It's kind of crazy. I'd love to know, changing tack a little bit here, but in your career, has it been anyone specifically who's impacted you in your career, who's really sort of helped lead you, who's been a mentor for you?
Oh God, yes. Yeah. In my book, the foreword is written by a man named Bill Krause. And he has, when I was a news anchor in Sacramento, California, my first job, I had started off being a road reporter, a traffic reporter. You know, I told you how to avoid a traffic snag or an accident. And I went in and I said, I will be an anchor here, so you might as well train me. And not long after I told them that, and they said, oh, well, you have quite the nice attitude. I said, yeah, well, I'm just confident. I was trained to be an anchor, and I met Bill, and, you know, I asked him if he would mentor me because I saw him speaking at a conference. And there are two things that stood out to me that apply today. One is have love come out of your eyes. They don't teach you that in J school. You know, and if you talk to somebody like Tyra, it's about smizing, right? You just I
was going to say, I talk about that all the time.
Yes, smizing. I talk to people who, when they looked into the camera so that they didn't look deadpan, they would imagine their sweet grandmother sitting on a sofa, or they'd imagine someone they loved. And instead of doing that, when Bill would say, let love come out of your eyes, he said, I want you to, whoever is on the other end of that screen, whoever's on the other side of that camera, I want them to feel that warmth. It's not a seduction. It's not flirtatious. It's really like, I want you to know you're not alone. I want you to know I get you. And I started working on that, 15 years ago. The other thing that he taught me was, it is not your job to share your opinion. I remember I was auditioning for an anchor job in another city, and they were having me banter with their investigative reporter, and it was over some controversial topic. And I said, I don't know what to do. You've taught me not to share my opinion 15 years ago. And he said, I don't, and this was, you know, a matter of time later. He said, I don't want you to share your opinion. He said, I want you to inspire and provoke to new thought. That's your job. And I really took those two things, let love come out of your eyes, exude warmth, exude friendliness, exude, you know, it's kind of like when you think of someone who can just let you know that they're like you, even though you never met them before, with a look. When you walk anywhere at the park, let's just say you're in Central Park, and you cross paths with someone, and even if they have a mask on, if you catch their eye and they have that warm smile in their eyes, you don't have to see any part of their face, you just know. That, honing that to connect with viewers, and knowing that it is not about giving my opinion, it is about inspiring people and provoking them to new thought.
My grandmother used to say that, you know, that she's talked about my grandfather, and I never met him, and she would say that he had kind eyes. And that was one of her great descriptions of him. He said he was a man with very kind eyes. And as a kid, you'd often wonder what kind eyes meant. And she would explain it to you. There's, when you looked at him, you knew that he was looking at you with kindness in his heart, right? So that concept of look with love, let love come out of your eyes. It's that, I think that to that point, if you look at someone and you're judgmental, you can tell when someone's judging you. Like when someone walks up and they are reading you like a book, like, do I like the cover? I don't care about the contents. I'm not probably going to ever read this book, but I want to see if I like the cover. And people do that with you. People, they look at you and they like, do I like his hair? Do I like his outfit? Does this person look right to me? Do they fit in? Are they a part of my group of people, or people I would want to be seen with or not? Or how does this person make me when I'm with that person? How do I feel because of the way they look? Regardless of the content of who that person is. And I think so that is very important. Certainly when you're a newscaster and your people are looking at your face, are you being judgmental without, not necessarily saying it in your words, but you don't need to. Yeah. Eyes are the windows to your soul, as we say. And that if you can say a million things about how you feel just by the way you're looking with your eyes as you say it, right? So that's super interesting. I think that's a really some wise words right there. Amazing, actually. A little takeaway. So, obviously mentors are an important thing. You did something just a moment ago where classic in news, by the way, folks, a little segue where Adrienne let out about her book. Right. So, she sort of said, well, in my book, which was, really, that's how we like to self-promote on television. We're able to organically pop out our little things here. I was about to get to your book. You didn't have to
go right ahead, Nigel. You're doing so great.
The author of Your Hidden Superpower, the kindness that makes you unbeatable at work and connects you with anyone, highlighting how kindness is a game changer in business, the door opener to fulfillment, and the key to authenticity and confidence. Talk to us about this book. I mean, so it's the actual title is Your Hidden Superpower, right?
Yes, that's the actual title. And I found that, when I was growing up in the industry and I was looking at different women who were journalists and who I aspired to be like, I thought every one of them had their thing, their it factor, right? And I thought, well, I can't really take somebody else's it factor. I have to tap into my own, but I don't know what it is. And so again, through mentoring, it was his idea. It was Bill's idea. He said, you should write a book on kindness because you get it at a different level than some people I've met and some people I know. And he said, you should write it down. And I found that my it factor, my way of connecting with people in interviews was to be kind. And it was very interesting to see people be surprised. I remember walking into some of my interviews with some of the biggest stars in the world and being kind to them genuinely, and their face just literally the face they would make, like, oh, this isn't going to be like your typical.
Were they expecting you to be what with them? Like,
don't
harsh,
know.
cruel, or
I just think that there's, you were talking about being judgy. I tell people all the time, and I actually told this to Diane Sawyer when I met her for the first time at ABC News, because she was asking me about my story. Talk about a woman who can see right through your soul. I mean, one of the greatest interviewers of all time. And she was asking me a question. And I said, well, when I go into an interview, it doesn't matter what that person has done or what their background is or what they believe. If I judge them, I know I've now shut down any chance of having a real interview with them. I can't have a conversation with you if you've already noticed my body language, my eyes are judgy, and I've already predetermined what I think about you and what I think you're going to say. The interview is officially cut off, even if we keep exchanging words. And so I decided that I would completely kind of take on this identity as someone who could use kindness as my, not so secret weapon, so to speak, or a key to unlock a door to people who are naturally guarded and really understandably guarded if they are somebody in the public spotlight. So I write about that. I write about a lot of stories from my days at Good Morning America, behind the scenes and in front of the cameras. And it's helped me actually connect with people when I'm not on camera, because I think that when you are on TV, you have a chance to actually use the tools that you've learned in media and apply them to real life.
Is there, you mentioned obviously these sort of various people that you've met and what have you, and I'm imagining some of these people appear in your book, but has there been interviews that perhaps have been, you mentioned being a game changer, are there elements of, are there been interviews or people you've met that have sort of changed your perspective dramatically, or helped you sort of perhaps to sort of fine tune the kind of person that you wanted to be?
Well, I think that when I write the book, again, I'm not trying to self-promote. I'm just saying this is what I wrote in the book.
The drinking game, everybody. Every time she mentions the book, have
drinking
a
game.
sip. Have a sip, okay?
When I mention book, you take a swig. There you go. I had been inspired by a quote by Diane von Furstenberg, who said, "I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew the kind of woman I wanted to be." And I realized that a job will never make me happy. A career would never make me happy. Traveling all over the world to these beautiful locations and staying in lovely luxury hotels is never going to make me happy. So what will make me happy? It will be becoming the person I want to be. And when I would look at, I mean, even just your story, I could put that in my next book when you said that you heard the grandfather you never met was described as having kind eyes. When I would look at posts from celebrities, Catherine Zeta-Jones, I saved a screenshot, her daughter's birthday last year, she wrote that she's most proud of her daughter because she's such a kind young woman. And Jennifer Lopez and Kim Kardashian, I want my kids to be kind. And so it was obviously something that, you know, we were raised to know existed. But the thing with me was, God, why do we make it seem like it's this elementary thing, that it's just an anti-bullying campaign, or it's something that children should know to do and it's something that grown-ups should know better to do? And I thought, how do you practically apply kindness rather than make it this nebulous thing about etiquette and being a nice person? What does that mean? And so I think that every time I sat down and I extended kindness and I saw kindness reciprocated, it was a game changer for me, because it just created more and more of a foundation for this is the right way to live. And you get tested, honestly. Like, I'm the oldest of 7 kids. I know how to scrap if I have to. You know what I'm saying? Like, we had fights. We had a lot of, like, you know, family dysfunction, like every family does. But the fact is that it is not easy to be kind all the time. It is a lot easier to just snap. It is a lot easier to speak ill of somebody or to go off on somebody. And that's kind of the world of media today anyway. It's just easier to just call people on their stuff. But I think that because I'm in front of a camera, it's actually heightened my awareness of the fact that none of us can afford that. You know, our kids are living in a day where you have to actually submit your social media account so they can do a quick screen of who you've been over the past, 5, 10, 15 years and what you've said. And if you've said anything that was considered unkind, and that could be taken into consideration for your job, for your future, for your college application, we can't afford. I remember I told somebody not too long ago, I said, I live my life like I'm always on camera. Do I mess up? Do I make mistakes? Abso-freaking-positively. But I still try to think, like, what if I was on camera right now? What if I was on a hot mic right now? I'm not walking on eggshells. It's like, how can I be the highest version of myself? You know, I imagine somebody like Kate Middleton has to constantly think about herself always being on camera. And what would she say if there was a hot mic rolling on her about anybody in her family, about anybody who maybe gave her a hard time in the press? So,
yes, yeah, Your Highness.
I mean, you know, you have to just, to me, we're being called to a higher standard in our culture today. It's not just political correctness, though there's a lot of that. It's not just cancel culture, though that could be a whole conversation we could talk an hour about. But I think that all of us are demanding of ourselves to be a lot kinder. And so we have to start using kindness as a kind of education and re-education, not just for kids, not just for, you know, moms and dads, but for all of us.
Yeah, you mentioned a second ago, you know, parents and various celebrities' parents saying, you know, nothing I want more than for my children to be kind. In my experience, children are inherently kind. It is the parents who are inherently cruel, and it is the reverse. It's not the children. Children don't learn to be kind. Children don't come out of, you know, into the world rather prejudiced or racist. They don't see color and they don't see disfigurement, really. They see kindness. And I can tell you firsthand from working with people with, you know, disabilities and what have you, where children don't care at all whether someone is disformed or, you know, has some perhaps mental, you know, impairment or whatever. If that person is kind and nice to them, then they love that person. And it doesn't matter who that person is, if that person is not nice to them, they do not find that person attractive, they do not like that person. And it is as simple as that. It is as cut and dry as kindness is the differentiator. And somehow we train our children through, whether it's at home or whether it's through school and it's education and it's the world that adults have created, where kids learn or forget all about kindness, or kindness becomes something which is, in my opinion, it seems to be almost a luxury for people. It's not something where we can't all afford to be kind because it's going to get in the way, or it's going to cause an issue, and it's better or more controlling, or you'll have more control over your life if you are perhaps more cynical. You're more judgmental. You're not going to you're sort of going to perhaps look after yourself first, right? Like look and we live in a society where paying taxes is frowned upon, in large part because we want to keep the money for ourselves. And it's like, well, of course, that's going to be better. Whereas if you look at countries sort of like Sweden and sort of Norway and countries in Europe where they have high tax brackets, but public services are on an all-time high with national health services and free college and university and various things like this, where you actually the statistics show that people on average is some of the happiest countries in the world, where people say they feel happy, they feel they're comfortable, right? But I think there's just it's a huge re-education that needs to happen. And I'm scared when I look at, I live here in the US, I'm born in England, I come from all over the world. Both my parents born in India, but my mother's Sri Lankan and my father's English Irish. I feel like I'm a sort of international person, right? And when I look at the world, although I live in New York, I don't feel like I have to be a New Yorker, or I'm just a person. I'm a sort of citizen of the world, if you like. And the thing that makes me scared is our lack of sensitivity and kindness and sort of genuineness. We are contrived a lot of the time, and we are what people want us to be. And I listening to you, I got to say, it feels great to actually hear you talk like this, because it's not something that you hear too often or really ever. And certainly not from someone who potentially is in the media, who has the ability to influence what people hear and how people hear it. Right. So, which is, I think, very important. I mean, this is not an interview about me, but I do feel like I love to have a good conversation, and I love to, try and get, really stimulate whoever I'm talking to, where they're coming from and what they're about. On the subject of kindness, do you feel that there is, you've mentioned it earlier, there's a wave of things changing, there's a groundswell of a sort of a rise, you mentioned various celebrities. Is it bigger than just that? Do you think that we can get past that? And what else do we have to do other than perhaps tell the news in a different way to really get this groundswell and this thing, this sort of actually happen, this bubble to burst or whatever?
Well, I think you mentioned children, and you mentioned how adults are the ones who teach hate and teach unkindness, a lack of compassion. I think that a lot of people are hurting today. I think that something that I'm glad that I learned as a younger adult, that most people I think probably realize as they're older, is how many disappointments have created wounds inside of them that have gone untended. Life doesn't go the way we want it to go. And sometimes we harbor resentments or anger towards a boss or towards somebody who possibly did us wrong, who looked a certain way, who treated us a certain way. I think that it's up to companies and corporations, not just the media. I mean, the media does have quite a powerful influence over culture, but if it was up to me, I would want every government, I would want every office, I would want every nonprofit organization to start looking at ways to create more compassionate culture, because people do spend more time at work than they do anything else. They spend more time on the clock than they do spending with their families. And how can we be more aware of each other? When the pandemic first hit, and I know that, thank goodness, we have come over a large hump, and to know that there were so many people, elderly people who weren't as mobile physically, who were just locked up, and no one could come see them, no one could come visit them, and they were fearful of getting contracting the virus. And just thinking about how public a place New York City is, it really just gave me this big shock of oh my gosh, there are people living like this every single day before this pandemic happened, where they felt alone. What are we doing to create a culture that is more aware of those who don't have family, who don't have the steadiness of the ringing of a phone or company that comes over for the weekend? And I think that as corporations are thinking about this move towards being hybrid, where you sometimes work at the office and sometimes you work at home, and parents are thinking about work-life balance more than ever, that we're going to have to really strategically think of the pressures that teachers are under right now after the past year and a half, but they've already under pressure, the kind of pressure that parents are under right now. And it's not going to come from just throwing money at the problem. We have to get to the root causes, and we have to care again. It was just Veterans Day here in the United States. And I hope that this is not a polarizing or political conversation surrounding Veterans Day, but for our country, a lot of people have a sense of patriotism. They want to honor those who have served. They want to honor those who are in the military. And I was talking to a gentleman with an organization that helps veterans, and I said, do you think we have lost honor in this country? And I said, do you think even people understand what it means to appreciate and honor those who served? And he looked at me and he kind of smiled and said, you know, Adrienne, thank you for saying that, because I think we have lost honor. You know, if we can't honor those who have in times past paid some of the highest, the most high price, how are we going to honor those who walk our streets every single day? And it's like, it's not going to turn in an instant. It's going to take people. How can we honor, you know, not to change topics too much, but how can we honor those who through the pandemic served us food and created meals for people who didn't have time to cook or needed to rely on takeout and Uber Eats? How are we going to honor those people? It's not just about throwing money at it. One of my favorite stories right now is how schools are so short-staffed. They are getting kids, teens, who are enrolled in their schools to be the janitors and to be the cafeteria workers. We are living on a different wavelength right now, and we rely on each other so much. So this isn't about a party line. This isn't about compartmentalizing all these different groups. It's actually paying attention to the fact that we need each other so much more now. Can you take the time to volunteer? Can you take the time to visit a convalescent home? Can you take the time to get a second job? Not because you need the money of $15 an hour, but because there are people there who are struggling because they're working double shifts. Can we take the time to thank our nurses and our medical community now that we're not cheering for them on doorsteps and outside in New York City like we were for months and months? How can we say thanks? How can we thank our airline staff, our crews, our flight attendants who are being assaulted? 5,000 incidents from the FAA of unruly passengers. We have a responsibility, in light of the fact that there are so many issues going on and so many atrocities going on in our culture today, there are many more of us than are with those people who are unruly. There are many more of us who are kind. I think that it's time for us to rise up and actually become very loud about being kind and compassionate in our society. And if I can do that at all with the news, and I definitely know I can in some way and fashion, and I'm doing it now by just putting stories of kindness and broadcasting them on TV every single day, I certainly will. And I'm dedicated to doing that.
Here, here. I couldn't agree more. I mean, quite frankly, volunteering people is the way to go. And I will, you know, literally, if there's anyone's ever asked me anything about how they can literally become a more, people ask me this because don't forget, guys, I'm a fashion photographer who worked on a show called America's Next Top Model. So people will say to me, "How am I beautiful?" Or they'll say, you know, "Oh yeah, people every day. Am I beautiful? Is my daughter beautiful? Or do you think I'm attractive?" And hundreds of people will ask you this question, and you know, and they, because of the insecurity and the desire for recognition by someone else to officially stamp you as being, you know, what's desired, right? And I'll say, you know, there's nothing that can make you more beautiful than your sense of confidence that comes from being proud of who you are as a person, right? And that one way to become proud of who you are as a person is to volunteer. If you give back, if you share, if you give kindness to people, then you have a right to walk out with your head held up high, with a strut in your step, with the feeling that you've done and worked hard to help other people. That, my friends, will make you the most beautiful person you can possibly ever be. That will have kindness in your eyes, right? Which is going back and not to trivialize it, but we talk about a smize. That is the ultimate smize, people, right there.
There you go, Tyra.
So you've got it right there in a nutshell. Where can people find NewsNation, first of all? Where do we locate it?
Okay, so it is cable, though we do have some streaming services on Hulu. If you go to newsnationnow.com on your cell phone, you actually scroll down to the bottom and there's a clickable channel finder, and it'll ask you to enter your zip code, and it'll locate all the stations, whether it's streaming or whether it's on cable and you have a cable provider, and tell you exactly where to find us. So it's, again, the network has only been around for a little over a year, so it's brand new. But I really believe I've talked to people of different age groups, and I was asking some people in their 20s at this fair I was at in Texas, and I said, if you could find news that was really positive and impartial, would you watch it? Yes. I said, even if you have to get cable? They said, yeah, because they were so tired of what they considered, something they didn't want to watch. And I said, well, what if you could find something that you liked? And they said, we would work hard to find it. And I hope that I'm being honest in the fact that I do believe them. I didn't think that they were just blowing smoke. So do that. You can go on NewsNation now. The App Store has it. And yeah, I'm really proud. I'm really proud to be doing this. And again, to be focused on positivity and the solutions that we need every day.
Before we let you go, and you've been very generous with your time, we have something called Last Orders on the Shaken and Stirred show, which is a quick kind of, you have to drink again, get your shot glass out. I know you're going to bed, I think now, probably you're past your bedtime. I'm already holding you up, aren't I? It's super simple. First of all, list 5 words that describe your character.
5 words that describe my character. Okay, tenacious, generous. Gosh, this is not easy to describe yourself, Nigel. Loyal, unique, and kind.
There you go. I was waiting for the last one. You saved that one to last. I'm like, okay, this is
that was an easy one.
Got to put kind in there somewhere. And this is a bit of a morbid question, but it's something which it kind of gets to it at the end of the day. What would you like your epitaph to read?
I thought about this because I went to this workshop once, and they were talking about the biggest real estate that will always go up in cost is your burial plot. What would I like my epitaph to read? Gosh, that is such a good question. I've thought about it. It is morbid. I think that I'd want it to read that I lived my full life, that I didn't leave anything on the table, and that I got to the place in my life where I made the people who met me feel better about themselves. The people who I've always been intrigued by and inspired by have always made everyone else around them feel better. And I think that's what everybody's craving. So I'm not perfect. I definitely have done some things that are not worthy of the front page of the Washington Post or the New York Times. But if I could have on my epitaph that, she grew to be the person that she always wanted to be, which was someone who always made others feel better. That's what I'm on a mission to do. So that would be a nice tombstone.
It certainly would. Well, a couple more. If you could travel back to any time in history, when and why?
To be quite honest with you, one of the regrets that I have, and it's not a huge regret because I don't really have regrets, but I would love to have interviewed Shirley Temple Black. And I was a young budding anchor in Sacramento, and I called her people. And it was already the time where she, I think, was going through her own ailments and nearing death, but I would have loved to interview her. So if I could have gone back a little bit earlier, if I would have been a little bit older, I would have gone back enough time to interview her. And I really am looking forward to one day, maybe on the other side, interviewing Mother Teresa, because I just can't understand somebody who has that much dedication to something.
That's so funny. That was my answer.
Really?
Mother Teresa, that was my answer.
So you're going to interview her first.
Right, I know. Why you're suggesting I'm going to die first? Is that what you're saying? Wow, that's extraordinary.
Well, no, because you said that was already your answer, so you already had your answer. So first come, first serve, right, Nigel?
Yeah, absolutely. First come, first serve. Says the oldest sister of 7. You got to love that right there. Final question: shaken or stirred, Adrienne?
Oh, Shaken.
And why shaken?
I don't know. I like ice.
And who said we were talking cocktails? Everybody, Adrienne Bankert. Check her out on Morning in America on NewsNation. You can find it. It's cable TV. You can find it on the App Store as well. Check out her book, Your Hidden Superpower. Thank you so much. Really, it's a real great conversation. I really appreciated it and a lot of fun. And I think I've got to make myself another cocktail now. Thank you very much for listening. That is Shaken and Stirred. We will be back next week with another podcast and another fantastic guest. And stay safe.
See ya.